Hello, thanks for coming in so many people. I'm really amazed after yesterday's party. I'm still a little bit shaking. So let's take it away and make it as painless as possible. So the theme today, fundraising, I know it's kind of a dry theme compared to games industry and games business. But I think it's necessary because every one of us is dealing with the same problem, like where to find money, how to get our projects funded. So, and as I have a bit experience in that, I thought it would be useful for you guys also to share some of those experiences. And we're gonna go through a couple of slides. And if you have questions, then just raise your hand anytime and ask the questions. So, first, a short introduction of myself. You're most probably questioning yourself, like, who is this guy? Why is he talking about fundraising? So, I've been in the games industry for more than 10 years, doing mostly like executive positions at a couple of companies. And I co-founded a few companies around Slovakia and the Czech Republic. The biggest one of them is Pixel Federation, which is now something like 150 employees. Then it's Game Dev Hub, which is kind of like co-organizing this event. And the other ones to mention, Fun2Robots, Czechoslovakian company, and Charge Monkey is my latest project in Prague, which I started like 3 months ago. So I'm doing a lot of cooperation with all kinds of companies, so if any of you has any kind of questions, concerns or whatever regarding game business, then feel free to reach out to me and ask questions. Don't worry, there are no stupid questions, so just... And I'm also like mentoring some companies, so just to give you a figure, so the deals that I've been kind of part of in the last couple of years, so there have been like total investments for close to 2 million euros. Okay, good. I have to get used to the lag of switching the slides, or perhaps my brain is lagging a little bit. So, why I want to talk about it very briefly. I think it's really, really important for everybody who has and wants to deal somehow with fundraising to understand how the investors tick, because they are kind of like rare animals, rare game, and especially in our region, you can be sure that talking to one investor means that you are talking to most of them because they know each other and there is like a handful of them. I want to give you some basic insights. I want to share some fails that have been done in the past so you don't have to repeat those fails. And the keywords here, really, the things that we're going to be going through are, first of all, expectation management, which is really important, and many people kind of forget about that. And it's incentives and motivation, because that's the thing that's really helpful to any of you in business in general. You always have to read the counterpart and see like why he is doing that, why he is saying that, what is his motivation, what are his incentives, and see if there is a match so you can work together. And then there's, of course, very different points of view from us as the game developers and from the investors. So, take it away. Disclaimer. I'd say I'm just talking about my experiences, sharing stuff. So there's like lots of ways, different opinions. So this is not like a rule of thumb, right? So I may be wrong in any of those things I'm saying today. Good. So the question of the questions, like where to find money, and I tried to order those things a little bit in a chronological order. So if you're looking for money, this is like where you start typically is the triple F, which is family, friends, and fools, who give you the money at the very beginning without knowing what you are going to do with it. And it continues through the time. So this is like a lot of options. And on the other side of the slide, you see basically like the stages of your project and the development of the project. So they kind of partially kind of correspond a little bit in this way, right? So at the very beginning, you reach out for the kind of like funding sources you have. You try to get your friends, your family aboard, get some money. Then you continue. Perhaps nowadays you can find a lot of support in incubators, startups, accelerators who can give you some starting money. Then basically it's a group of mixture of crowdfunding, then large game developers. Then you continue to the kind of like real investors who are basically business angels, VC funds. Nowadays, publishers, again, can also give you money for the development because they also realize that they have to be part of this financing structure for game development. Partners and platform operators, there are guys like Microsoft who can give you some support, perhaps. In a certain way, also Google and Apple. There's a lot of opportunities on emerging platforms, especially like for PlayStation now, for Xbox. Now, you know that Windows 10 is coming, so Microsoft will also promote that, which opens opportunity for game developers. And as your project grows, then you actually are kind of like also a viable partner for, let's say, large funds and what we call consolidators, that are like bigger companies that are buying smaller companies. Good. Next one. So this infographic, which is really cool, I found it very interesting. It's from funders and founders. It's showing like your idea, your company is growing from a small one to a big one. By the way, I'm gonna share then the stuff later on Game Dev Hub, so you can check it out, or just note that fundersandfounders.com, because it's a really cool site for getting any insight into investments and companies. So typically, the project starts at the idea stage, where you have the brilliant idea of this fantastic, awesome game that will rock. And you just continue that. You find a co-founder, then you kind of share the company with your co-founder, then you address your family, friends, and fools who can co-invest money into that, so the pie gets divided. Then you get into the seed round, which is typically the first kind of like real investors, like people who don't know you, basically, and you're trying to get some money from them. Also, that costs you a certain share in your company. And then as it grows to what we call Series A, which is like the first like big financing round, when the project is either already launched or very close to launch. So Series A is basically for growth and marketing support. And then some companies make it into what's the unicorn status, which is like a billion-dollar companies that go public to the public market. All right. So in general, I mean, like there's nothing kind of like complicated. There is no rocket science about investing, right? Many people think it has to be so elaborate, and these guys are thinking, they have these huge tables where they evaluate companies and know like the pricings and so on. No, that's all bullshit. It's really, really, really simple. It's all about incentives and motivation of the people who get together. So basically what you are doing, you're selling an investor your dream. You are selling him your promises, right? He has to buy in, and you have to keep your promises, and make it happen. So that's basically the very, very simple equation. And what's underlying of that is like, you know that from teamwork, and basically if you get an investor aboard, he is part of the team, so you have to share common interests, you have to share a common vision, because otherwise it won't work. So that's what we're going to talk about today. This is a slide I had to just put in because, like, why do investors invest money into projects, right? No, it's definitely not a charity. It's definitely not any kind of love for games or anything. It's very simple. It's just we invest because we want to make profit. That's the main part of it, right? So what everybody has to kind of like come back and understand every day is the investor has the money because he can deal with it. Like if an investor would not be able to deal with money, invest wisely, then he would lose the money and he's not there anymore, right? So these people can work with money very very well. And what I found really funny about this thing is that fundraising, it's a game. I realized it's like over a certain period of time while doing game business, talking to all these people are actually enjoying investing money, enjoying the whole process of negotiations and fundraising. So they're actually playing a game that's for them like the game that they totally enjoy and makes them happy. So don't lose the game, because if you lose the game, then the game is over. Okay, just a remark. Of course, investors typically invest into projects they like also, so there is a certain emotional attachment to it, but I would not recommend you kind of like counting on that emotional attachment, because it can be very, very counterproductive. Most investors have certain kind of, we'll come to that later, portfolios and kind of like their areas of expertise where they invest their money, and games or IT business in general can be kind of part of it. Good. So how do the investors stick? I mean, what I found all the time amazing is kind of like trying to get into the head of your counterpart at any kind of negotiations and try to imagine like how does he, what's his point of view, what are his expectations, what is his motivation. And I feel this is really important. I was thinking about it a lot, and I think that you can bring it into very, like this is the very abstract of it, the incentives. So it's like on one side is the risks of the investment, on the other side it's the benefits, and so it's the proof that you can do it versus the upside that's kind of like at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. So if you're investing into risky businesses, then you want to make a lot of money as the upside, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. So just to give you a rough figure, if you would say like the average chance for a game developer to succeed and for an experienced game developer to succeed is 5% on the market, that means 1 of 20 companies succeeds. So if you would invest 100,000 euros into each one of the companies, you would invest total 2 million, and this 2 million have to return in a certain way. So one of those succeeding companies has to make 2 million euros profit down the road, so it pays off for you, which means, very roughly speaking, the investor is expecting an upside of a factor of 20x, right? So he gives you 100K, especially this is kind of like the seed investment stage. He gives you 100K and he expects that he's going to make 2 million out of it. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense for him to invest the money. So typically what investments, then later stages, what investors are looking for, this is like a very brief, well to understand figures. So it's 2x in 3 years, or it's basically 3x in 5 years. Like that's the so-called return of investment. There are additional factors in the thinking of an investor. One of them is his portfolio. So he's thinking about whether this investment would fit into his portfolio. And that's basically very similar to the way how banks are thinking and evaluating their portfolios, because they have to manage the risks, right? So it's always about how much you invest, what's the upside, and what's going to be the profit down the road. Then is the availability of cash. So today, the global capital market is in a state where there is a lot of cash available. It's once again, it's almost in a situation as it was before 2008. And this has two effects. First of all, none of those people who invest want to keep money at the bank because there's no interest rates for that. Basically today, banks, if they have uninvested cash, their interest rate is negative from the national banks. So basically they pay the national banks to keep the money. So they have to invest it. The downside for it is, like for us as developers, is great because there is a lot of cash available today. The situation may change towards the end of the year, but now it's a good time to get some money. Downside for the banks is that the valuations of all the companies, because of this large amount of cash available, are getting really high. So that means there's like the success stories you hear that there's a company bought for I don't know how many billions of dollars and so on. That's just because the valuations and the expectations are so high. Good. So the question then is, like, I mean, any of you guys who were or are looking for money is like, what's the value of a startup? A startup is typically, startup consists typically of a bunch of people, an idea, perhaps a very early prototype, right? So what's the value of that company? And for the investors, their occupation is exactly the thing to assess and evaluate companies, how much they are worth, right? So at the very beginning, the value of the company basically consists of its people, because the few computers that you own, the idea and so on, it's worthless, right, without execution. So how to do it? The valuation of the company is the expectation down the road. Basically, it's the future of the company, it's the future revenues of the company. That's what makes it interesting. So the investors are specifically looking for whether you can make it. So this is your idea, and you can have a great idea. I mean, great in terms of big, huge idea, like I want to do the next Facebook, right? But then the investor is going to look like, yeah, are you really the guys who can make the next Facebook? I would say like, most probably not. And so on, right? So, and they are looking specifically for some evidence for your claims, like why does it make, first of all, sense to make next Facebook, for instance, right? Is there a market for that? Definitely, you're not the only guy who has this brilliant idea, seeing Facebook and its success, that I want to make the next Facebook and also make a lot of money with that. So in other words, it's a team they're going to look at first. Like, who are you guys? What did you before? Do you have expertise in the areas, the competencies? Do you have a track record that kind of like justifies your claims and proves it that you are potentially capable of doing that? They're going to look at the product itself, whether the prototype or just first few wireframes or whatever of the game or of the project. They're going to look at the market, like, is there a place? Is a space for creating another Facebook? Is there a place for another RPG, fantasy, MMO? And specifically, I mean, you heard of that, I'm sure, so many times, the USPs, so the unique selling points or proposition. So what makes your game unique? What makes your game stand out of the market? I mean, it's something that sounds already like a cliche, but I found it very, very interesting also for the projects I've been doing, that once you're trying to identify these points, which definitely is not something like we have the most beautiful graphics. No, that's not a unique selling point. Anybody can have a most beautiful graphics. So you have to really identify and circle a few times, make a few iterations on that, and that makes also you guys understand your project, your game, into the deepest corners of that. Good. And all in one set, the investors are successful if they are the best guys to assess people. This is their job. Their job is to talk with people, to go out, perhaps with you for lunch, and just watch, explore, find out, get to know you. Are you the guy who's going to make it or not? So the people assessment is like the top one thing that investors are really, really good at. So, in other words, if you turn it around, that means don't try to trick them, because you're going to fail. They're going to see that you are bullshitting. So the best way is to be really honest in the communication and tell the truth. Good. Not sure whether I want to go into this. So perhaps the interesting thing is valuation of the company. So in IT, the rule is that your valuation, if you have revenues, then your valuation is your gross profit times 10. That's like a industry standard, which means if your company makes revenues with the last year, let's say 1 million euros, then your valuation, revenues, I meant profit of 1 million euros, then your valuation will be basically plus minus 10 million euros. There is like a few things that also get into this valuation of the company. So this factor, this factor 10 here, we call that multiplier. The 10 is like the average. It can be less if your company is not doing so well. It can be more if your company is doing really brilliant. And there is a discount attached to that, which then considers the risks that your company has attached to it. Let's say like your company has a problematic IP because there is someone else who can claim it, then your company gets a discount on that, because that's a potential risk down the road. When you get successful, then you could get sued by someone for your profits because he claims the IP. Sorry. So, if you don't have any revenues, what's the value? That's a tricky part. Then the value will be considered against your business plan, which means today the company has no revenues, is basically can't be calculated in that way. Then the company is valued against its business plan. So let's say like what's down there in 3 years, but then the discount gets massive, right? Because it's just expectations. There is no proof for that. So, and basically I just added the whole kind of like investment process is about companies, it's not about projects. So many people think that you can attract investors and say like, yeah guys, come on, invest into our project, we have a great idea, but we're not gonna give you any company shares for that. So that's not working. So the investors typically talk about investments that take equity from you, from a company, so that means you are selling part of the company. Good. So, the typical questions from an investor is what you got, how much money do you need, and what's your chance to succeed. And the chance to succeed is exactly the part of the valuation process, assessment of the people and of the founders, and it's really, really close. If you want to see it different way, then you just look at betting. If you go want to bet on anything you can imagine, let's say horse races or whatever, it's the same thing, right? So the investor looks at the horses and tries to find out that which of the horses is kind of the best one, and he bets on that horse. And sometimes he also does the betting of several horses because he's managing kind of his portfolio. And I want to emphasize one important thing, that game business is the riskiest of the IT businesses. So basically, you have to identify and mitigate your risks. So, finding the solutions to your risks, because that makes you valuable for an investor. In no case, don't try to hide those risks, because it makes really no sense. It's better to show an investor, dude, I know what are my risks down the road. I'm watching them, and these are my solutions to that. And then he sees, yeah, this guy is really competent about what he's doing. How much time is left? 10 minutes, wonderful. So, funding rounds. Many people think that the best thing you can do is get funded and get 1 million euros from an investor and make magic happen then. But this is not true, because you're trying to make a realistic valuation of your company. If you don't have the value that would kind of like satisfy or justify that 1 million figure, then it's first of all nonsense. Second of all, if you are close to that, it can put you and your company into a difficult situation for the next valuation rounds. It could mean that you would have to give up a big chunk of your company in that valuation round. So that's better, and that's why the users on the market is going from a seed round or pre-seed round, seed round, then Series A, as the company grows eventually, right? Because if you're at the beginning, your company may be worth, let's say, 100,000 euros, and you need 20K to get it started. So, okay, that means you would say, okay, I want to sell 10% of the company for 10K or 20K. That's realistic. Then the next round, your company has a prototype, it shows really sexy, you have some market proof, then the company valuation grows, and you can get for 10% 200K, right? Which means you want to see like what is the cost of the investment, because you are giving up something in exchange for that. Okay? So there are different models. The classic one is equity, means selling company shares. There can be loans and stuff like that, which are not the best ones. Why isn't loan a good option for anybody here? Because a loan means that your company owes money to someone, right? And that guy who lends you the money can call for the money anytime, basically. So for another investor, it will be very, very risky to get into a company which owes, let's say, 100K to someone, right? Because that guy can actually destroy the company at any point if he calls for the money. And one thing that is really, really underestimated a lot of time is the time basically that takes it to go from the first negotiations into finishing the deal. It's typically on the average, it's like 6 months. Sometimes it can be faster, so 3 months. I've heard also about deals that took 9 or 12 months. The goal is that if you want to grow a company and you need more and more investments, then you want to keep your majority in the company until the Series A, meaning when the company is on the market, has a product, and can grow. It's also for the investors. I heard also about examples when there was an investor, and by the way, I talked to one like recently, perhaps a month ago or something, and this guy was saying like, yeah, wonderful, so I can give you 1 million euros, and I want 51% of the company. But that's totally nonsense, right? Because if you why do you want to have 51% of the company? Why you as founders of the company should definitely keep 50+%? It's because you control the company. The investor who comes aboard, he has no idea about how to run a gaming company, so it makes no sense from a business perspective for him to have this desire for the control of the company. Right? It's total nonsense. So even if someone approaches you with such a deal, then you know that's a bullshitter. Good. Okay, let's run through the rest and have some time also for Q&A. Get to know your investor. You can definitely find information about the guys, especially in the region. There's like not that many of them. There's many people who have also already experience with them. So just ask them, like, how do you work with this guy? Is he fine? Is he okay? What does it look like? What does it feel like, right? So first who, then what. This is very true also about investment. So don't be afraid to ask stupid questions, like any questions, because if you don't ask them, then you are stupid, basically, right? Because you don't know, like, how is this guy thinking, and what's behind that. What does he want? What's his experience? Is he added value for you or not, right? Definitely a good example would be, it's like a marriage, because this guy is going to be on board, he's going to be part of your company till the end. It's like you're going to deal with that guy every day, he's going to call you, you will have to present him results, he'll be part of the decision making of any strategy for the company. So preparing for a negotiation or a deal starts with creating a pitch document, so concept, 10-pager, 1-pager. You have to build a business model that proves that your company is going to be successful, sustainable, that it's not going to end after a few months. But what I would say, okay, also you can create a trailer or demo as evidence for a presentation for an investor, but the best thing you can do is a playable prototype. Because if you are able to show your investor, and let's say I'm doing mostly like mobile games, so if you can give the investor a iPad into his hands with a prototype that's playable and he enjoys it, then you won, basically, right? So my tip would be, if you want to pitch successfully to an investor, of course you have to have a decent pitch, you have to have a business model, but the winner would be create a prototype, try to reduce your game into an MVP, so you don't have to, do all the fancy stuff, and try to focus on the core loop and on the onboarding, right? Because that's also what we game developers many times forget, that our ultimate goal is to produce user gameplay experience. That's what we have. We sometimes go to the direction of creating fancy technical features or creating a totally awesome, perhaps awesome art style and so on, and we forget that what we do is actually we provide our players with fun, right? Entertainment. So if you can give the investor a fun-to-play demo into his hands, he's going to be happy. He's not going to ask any questions for 15 minutes because he'll be playing. Then that's your goal. Good. Pitch deck structure. So I think I just brought up a few things that I think that are most important. Foremost is a team. Team. We are kind of like as Charge Monkey talking to a couple of investors for the next rounds, and one of the guys is like a big investment company from London, and that's going to be it's kind of like negotiated via a business developer, and I asked him like, wow, that's so awesome, it's a company that they invested into Unity, they invested into Supercell, and they're now interested in us, that's so awesome. And like, what convinced them? And this guy said like, team. Because in the beginning, they don't know whether you're going to succeed, but if you have an experienced team with a track record, that's what makes investors most happy. And then try to think, and I totally suggest this to anybody, really iterate many times on that, like what makes your game brilliant? Why is it a great idea to make this game? Why you want to spend your next 2-3 years on that? Why would people play that game? Why are you so sure that you can provide for an excellent gaming experience that would compete on the market with any other game that's out there? Okay? So, and as I said, like with investors, it's like you can approach them mostly once, and if you fail that first time, then you're going to be in trouble. So make sure this is like really your chance, and you're going to score. That's really important. So if you are not ready for talking to investors, then just don't do it. Iterate, present your pitch, talking to friends, talking to other game developers. In this way, you're going to find out, you're really going to get to know your project really well. Because you have to present like this, if a guy is asking you like, what are you working on? And then you have like 30 seconds basically to catch his attention and tell him like what it's going to be. Right? And this makes then also you think about your game design, your project, that okay, so these guys really liked when I presented this idea this way, and this didn't work, so you get also feedback, and that feedback you have to then incorporate into your design. Then, so it's a loop. It's a loop. All right, negotiations. To make a really fast summary of that, as I said, the execution time, 6 months. It depends on the size of the investment, of course, and on your relation with the investors, but don't underestimate that. And one important thing is always, if you are making a deal, always incorporate several points of view on that deal. So just talk with lawyers. Have one lawyer that's really representing you and your interests. Don't do it yourself. In any case, that can really, really hurt you in the end. The important thing, after you catch the interest of an investor, then you try to form a term sheet, which summarizes like the basic. It's a business deal basically. And you have to deal with this term sheet before the lawyers gets on it, because the lawyers then make a fancy 30 pages document out of that, and you don't understand a single word of it. So just do the term sheet and agree on the term sheet first before any lawyer sees that. I experienced, by the way, like several times that we agreed on a term sheet, and then the lawyers, they're like fancy, they want to protect their clients, and they want to also show off that they are really good lawyers, and then they start to invent stuff into that contract. And then you look at the contract and say like, what the fuck is this? Because it was not in the term sheet or anything. And then you talk and you get like, oh my God, this investor, he wants to get me in trouble and so on. But then you talk to the investor, and the investor says, no, I don't need that. It's like bullshit, So be careful about that. Good. I want to emphasize definitely that dealing with investor, it's really building a relationship that has to also sustain for months and years. So don't forget about it. Definitely be the one who is able, first of all, do the expectation management, because things change over time. That's really natural. That's not a problem. It's not a problem for investors. Of course, you agree on something, but life's difficult. Things change. You have to update your investor with where you're going, where you're heading. We have trouble. There is nothing bad about it. The bad thing about it is if you would kind of like try to hide it away from the investor and would say, yeah, it's fine, and then suddenly, when everything breaks, you don't have no money and nothing, right? So really work on that expectation, because then you really can work together. Then you are really aboard. Customer care, like your investor is basically one of your customers, definitely. You have to see that in the way, and you have to give him the customer care he requires, and he should have. Perhaps the last thing to mention here from this slide, don't get too personal. I really kind of like didn't like it anytime being personal with investors, because you have to have a business relationship, right? It's not, I mean, in English you're saying you, but you know that in Slovak and in Czech it's different, and I would really say rather the kind of like you from the distance than being really personal to an investor, because you have to behave professionally. And the important thing is your company at the beginning is small. You don't want to waste time and money on lawyers setting up your contract, setting up the deal structure and so on, but you definitely should focus in a certain way, an amount of time, creating the rules of your cooperation. And also thinking in advance that once the company grows, and the 1% of the company can be worth 100,000 euros, then it's going to be difficult to negotiate anything. So the relationship within the company, with you founders, with your investor, have to evolve as the company evolves itself. Right? As the company grows, then also these relationships have to improve over time. Good. Quickly. Okay, so negotiating a deal takes a lot of time. So what can I do in the meantime, right? And I always tell these old guys, you know, there's a lot of money everywhere. You just have to identify it and you have to find it, because if you can save money, that also is like finding money. So bootstrap, try to lower your costs anywhere you can. Barter. Anything you can use, just use it, right? So if it's like the computer from my mom or something, you know, you don't have to buy the computer. So, and find the opportunities in networking, because you can find fast deals that are helping you to survive, right? So all the time, like people say, tomorrow our company is going to die and we need the money really quick, but then they manage to survive somehow the next 3-6 months until the deal is finished. So just work on it, and don't fall into the trap saying like, yeah, we're gonna die tomorrow, right? You have to see what are your costs and where you're evolving into, not falling into the trap going bankrupt from like one day to another, because you can see that coming for quite a long time. Good. So this is a summary. As I said, I'm going to post it definitely on the Game Dev Hub, so just subscribe there. If I should pick one of those, sometimes in our region we are really bad at this part here. So doing like a really good self-promotion and showing off like what are our strengths, why we are so good, why we are going to make it. And the nevers, or the don'ts, definitely don't get money from any kind of questionable sources, because that can really kick back really hard. Avoid inexperienced investors or investors that look only for profit, because especially in gaming, there have been success stories over the last few years, and if you see an investor who tells you he's so fucking excited about Clash of Clans and wants to make profit on the game and reads that it makes millions and billions, then you know this is not your guy, because he's like somewhere in a different universe. And also, if you have doubts or bad feelings about an investor, it's just like perhaps consider it to be something like a hiring process with an employee. So if you are not sure that you want to see this guy every day, you want to actually kind of like marry him in a business sense, kind of like. So just forget it, don't do it, because it's going to also backfire pretty well down the road. Don't give away more than 50% of your company, and make sure that you're going to score once you have the opportunity and you see the investor. He's there, he has the time in his schedule to score the point, right? Okay, and the last thing. I think many people have also kind of like problems understanding this. It has to do a lot with the expectation management. There is nothing set in stone, nothing. So even if you agree on something, that can change over time. So, and that's nothing bad about it. It's a relationship, right? So you're working on it together. You're working on the company together. You can negotiate all the time. All the time something changes. Just give the updates and make sure that the investor is on board. Good. So thank you for watching that and this kind of like business talk.
Yeah, we still have a couple of minutes for a question or two. So if you have one, just raise your hand and I'll come to you. Anyone?
Hi. Again, missed your 10 minutes from the start. So, question, do you have any experience with AngelList? And second, can you be more kind of a Pixel Federation specific how you did your deal?
So, no, I don't have experience with AngelList, but this is not the only kind of like angel investors out there. But I know some of those guys. So, as I said at the beginning, so if you are talking to one, you are talking actually to half of them because they talk among each other and know what's happening most of the time. Are you looking specifically for something, something or someone in AngelList? Yeah, I know some of the guys, and I mean they're actually honest businessmen. So definitely, they're not any. I wouldn't say that any of them is kind of like this like wild East type of business guy or these Arabian guys who want to buy your company with barrels of oil, right? So they have definitely realistic expectations, and they're worth it definitely. And second question was like Pixel. How we did it with Pixel? That was really untypical thing because it was like 8 years ago and the times were kind of like different and difficult. So basically the type of investment that we had at Pixel, there was a part of the money that was invested directly in the company and part of the money which was actually a loan to the company. And yeah, it was close to €1 million altogether.
Okay, so thank you for your presentation, and our next session will start in about 5 minutes. So if you have any other questions, I think that Filip will be available somewhere.
Yeah, sure. Don't like if you have any questions, if you're looking for investors or anything, just I'm here. Reach out to me, and let's talk about it. Thank you very much.